In a cramped Portland office in 1971, one young designer would sketch a shape that changed sports forever. Carolyn Davidson was a college student, quiet, talented, and looking for work. She had a gift for design, but at the time, all she hoped for was a few extra dollars to pay for school. That's when she crossed paths with Phil Knight, an ambitious University of Oregon track coach who was busy launching a small athletic shoe company with his coach, Bill Bowerman. The company was still nameless, its logo undecided, and Knight needed someone, anyone, who could draw something memorable. He gave Carolyn a simple brief: make something that looks like movement. She agreed, for $2 an hour. And what started as a small job for a few extra bucks would become a logo that the whole world would one day recognize. And sometimes the most iconic design is born not in a boardroom, but on the pages of a student's sketchbook. Carolyn spent long nights bent over sheets of tracing paper, sketching shapes inspired by wings, motion, and speed. Her small apartment was a mess of crumpled drafts and pencil shavings. Nothing felt quite right. Every stroke was a test, too straight, too sharp, too much like something else. And each time she paused, she thought, is this good enough for them? Weeks passed like this. Meanwhile, Knight and his team were pushing for a design, something bold, memorable, fast. And slowly, one particular curve began to stand out on the page. A clean, graceful arc that seemed to move forward even when it was perfectly still. That was the one. When her pencil lifted, the world was forever changed. When Carolyn finally showed her designs to Knight, she was nervous, uncertain if any of them would pass. He stared at the simple, flowing shape she called a swoosh. He frowned, he thought, and then he nodded. I don't love it, Knight told her honestly, but I think it will grow on me. And so it did, in ways neither of them could ever have imagined. With that, the company had its new logo, forever setting itself on a path toward becoming Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. And that tiny $35 design would one day conquer stadiums and billboards across the globe. And that simple stroke would soon lead a company into sporting history. With Carolyn's swoosh adopted, the company took its first steps under its new name, Nike, forever moving beyond its early blue ribbon sports identity. But at the time, none of them could see what was coming. The early years were lean. Shoes were sold from trunks of cars at local track meets. The team was small and scrappy. And that quiet, graceful logo was stamped onto sneakers that only serious runners and athletes knew. Yet, even then, that elegant swoosh began working its magic. The logo didn't shout. It whispered a promise of movement, speed, and victory. And as athletes pushed their limits on the track and on the court, the swoosh became a badge of determination. And as Nike soared, Carolyn remained in the background, until the company decided it was time to thank her. By the late 1970s, Nike was becoming a sports powerhouse. But Carolyn? She had long since moved on to other design work, hardly thinking of that one freelance project all those years ago. Then came a surprise. Phil Knight invited her to a company dinner. He handed her a small box, and inside was a gold ring adorned with a tiny swoosh, set with a diamond. And he gave her shares of Nike stock, hundreds of them. It was a heartfelt thank you for the student who had once been paid only $35. And Knight finally told her what he hadn't back then, that her design had become the soul of the company. And that one graceful curve would inspire the world for decades to come. By the time athletes like Michael Jordan and Serena Williams wore the swoosh on global stages, the logo was more than a design. It was a banner under which millions chased their own goals. That quiet symbol had built its own empire of sports and culture, from the greatest sporting triumphs to the simplest morning runs. And wherever you looked, on sneakers, jerseys, billboards, there it was, forever leaning forward, forever moving toward the next victory. And even though most people never knew the girl who first sketched it, her work had become part of a language everyone could speak, one that needed no words at all. And long after her pencil lifted, the world kept moving. By the time Nike became a billion-dollar powerhouse, its logo was everywhere. On Olympic sprinters shattering records, on soccer pitches across Europe and South America, on basketball courts under stadium lights where champions were crowned. Yet most people never paused to wonder where the swoosh began. Few would have guessed that it started with a college student in a quiet room, a stack of tracing paper, and a dream that one day her work might matter. And matter it did. That simple curve carried all of sport with it. Its struggle, its triumphs, its joy. Every time someone laced up their Nikes and took a deep breath before a run, Carolyn's design was there, invisible but unstoppable, like the wind at their back. And if a single sketch could change the world, what might your hands do? More than 5 decades have passed since that first swoosh. And Carolyn Davidson's story reminds us that greatness often begins in the most unassuming places. A side job, a tiny draft, an idea you almost discard. What if she had decided she wasn't good enough? What if she'd stopped after the first rejected design? But she didn't. And because she kept going, an entire global culture learned to recognize the symbol of moving forward. So the next time you stare at a blank page, wondering if your work could ever matter, remember Carolyn. And remember that sometimes all it takes is one stroke of a pencil, one graceful forward-leaning curve, one quiet idea that changes everything.